Financial crisis 2.0 is here. And PPI numbers just came out, and I hope it comes as a surprise to no one that inflation is getting worse, because inflation is getting worse. And for the first time ever, credit card balances for the US consumer has risen to over $1 trillion, with a T, $1 trillion in credit card debt. And debt eats equity, and debt is no bueno. If you're new to the channel, welcome aboard. My name is Chris Igo. If you're a returning viewer, I appreciate your participation in our journey. And before I do a deep dive into some of the financial risks I see inherent in the system right now, before I unpack Financial Crisis 2.0, which has begun, I would be completely irresponsible if I didn't point out the elephant in the room, which of course is the castle which is behind me. And I have certainly done my fair share of traveling, and I've certainly stayed in many nice places. But I can honestly say that I've never once stayed at an actual castle. And as a boots-on-the-ground operator of a high-performance real estate team in South Florida, I get the opportunity to see many incredibly luxurious homes. But because it is South Florida, most of these homes don't typically have a tremendous amount of land. And while I'm not going to walk the property for this video, because if I did, this video would be 2 hours long. This is an enormous piece of property, and this is a massive freaking castle. And it's clearly very impressive. And although we've got a big group of guys that are here for this hiking trip, this is 20,000 square feet. This castle accommodates north of 20 people. It's got 16 beds, 7 bathrooms, and so much space that I'm virtually guaranteed not to hear any of my friends' hellacious snoring. And who am I kidding? It's really me with the snoring problem. But as a real estate professional and an investor, I immediately became very curious about the financial particulars of this castle. Because I know for certain right now, there are lots of real estate investors that got into the Airbnb game thinking it was a slam dunk guarantee due to the strength of the economy and easy money being available. And while that was definitely true for a period of time, there are lots of investors right now who are struggling and might be holding on to a lemon that is no longer worth the squeeze. I'm going to take you inside. We're going to do a little tour, but investors are watching their budgets. Prudent, disciplined, financially responsible investors are very aware of their balance sheets. They're very aware of where their cash and their spending goes. And they definitely want a return on their investment. And they are hyper-focused on what their debt service obligations are. And if they get that wrong, they are in big trouble. And I certainly don't want anyone to be in trouble. But if you find yourself upside down, just know there are always solutions. And one obvious solution I can see through this window is the need for a swimming pool. And check out this multi-million-dollar view. This room is epic. I mean, we're in a freaking castle, for crying out loud. As evidenced by the swords and body armor on top of the fireplace. And speaking of fireplace, the government is burning money, and we're gonna get into that right now. And I'm gonna take you out back. If you want to buy a home today and you need to get financing for that home, well, then you must demonstrate that you are financially responsible. You must demonstrate that you can manage your debt and income. And if you don't have the right debt to income ratio, well, then chances are you're not getting a loan because you have proven that you are not creditworthy. And while the US government's credit score just took a hit, the market didn't really seem to notice. The financial market certainly didn't seem to take notice, and nobody really seemed to care. And while I understand that Fitch is not exactly a best-in-breed ratings organization, It doesn't take an economist or an analyst to figure out that the United States Treasury is absolutely broke. And please, don't take my word for it. Do your own due diligence. Just Google these terms. It's very easy to find on your own. But what's good for the consumer, what's good for the goose, must be good for the gander, right? If there's an expectation of fiscal responsibility by the consumer, isn't it fair to assume that the government should be held to the same standard? Because I definitely think that it should. Now, I mentioned earlier that unpaid credit card balances are up to over $1 trillion for the first time ever. And as no bueno as that fact is, because it tells us a tremendous amount about the financial strength of the consumer. What you might not know is that the federal government debt interest payments are up to over $1 trillion. And whether you think the housing market's going to crash, or the stock market's going to crash, or the banking system is going to crash, the truth is the market doesn't care what you think, and the market is always right. But at some point soon, the market will no longer be able to ignore the fact that the U.S. debt service is over $1 trillion. In fact, the U.S. is paying interest on our debt with a larger cash outlay than was allocated for national defense. That is no bueno. And banks, no likey. They're selling off those treasuries. But there's nothing to be concerned about because they say it's all going to be okay. And despite the fact that tax revenues came in lighter than expected, the Treasury has a solution. They're going to go out there and issue more treasuries. And their plan is to raise cash by selling $2 trillion in treasury bonds over the course of the next 2 quarters. And to be clear, the money that they're raising is to pay the interest on the debt that they cannot currently pay. And that, unfortunately, my friends, is what a debt spiral is. And make no mistake, we are in a debt spiral. And unfortunately, that is only getting worse. Now, I hope you found this content valuable. And if you did, please subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up, share it with a friend. Check me out on Twitter, where I can never be censored. Follow me on Patreon, where I go off. And check out my next video because I suspect you will love it a lot. And until next time, peace. I'm taking a video of you taking a picture.
Full flow I go. Get ready for speed. Woo! Yeah. He's going under.